Hi guys, welcome back to the So Food podcast, a safe space where we talk about God, theology, the Bible, and the Christian life in general. I'm your host, Noma. Last time, I taught on what day and time will Jesus' second return happen according to Matthew 24 from verse 36 to 41. Today, I will be continuing with the series on the second coming of Jesus Christ. From my last episode, if we do not know what date and time Jesus will return, how should we be living until then? Did Jesus say anything on this topic? And if so, what was his answer? The short answer is yes. Jesus did say something on this topic. So let's read all about it from Matthew 24, from verse 42 to 44, which says, "So you too must keep watch, for you don't know what day your Lord is coming. Understand this. If a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would keep watch and not permit his house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least suspected." Here again, Jesus reiterates the fact that his second coming will be unexpected, but he doesn't leave it at that. Instead, he instructs us to keep watch and be ready all the time. But how do we do this? I'm glad you asked. The Lord tells us exactly how to do this in Matthew chapter 25 from verse 1 to 13, famously known as the parable of the 10 virgins, which says, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The 5 who were foolish didn't take enough olive oil for their lamps, but the other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. When the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, they were roused by the shout, 'Look, the bridegroom is coming. Come out and meet him.' All the bridesmaids got up and prepared their lamps. Then the 5 foolish ones asked the others, 'Please give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out.' But the others replied, 'We don't have enough for all of us. Go to our shop and buy some for yourselves.' But while they were gone to buy oil, the bridegroom came. Then those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was locked. Later, when the other 5 bridesmaids returned, they stood outside, calling, 'Lord, Lord, open the door for us.' But he called back, 'Believe me, I don't know you. So you too must keep watch, for you don't know the day or hour of my return." Here again, Jesus reiterates the fact that his second coming will be unexpected. Saints, in its proper context, the parable of the 10 virgins was told by Jesus in response to his disciples' questions of, "Tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world?" in Matthew 24 verse 3. Even though this particular parable is recorded in Matthew 25, it's the same conversation and questions that were asked in the previous chapter, to which Jesus responds to with 3 parables, namely, the parable of the faithful servant and the evil servant in Matthew 24 from verse 45 to 51, the parable of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25 from verse 1 to 13, which we just read, and the parable of the talents in Matthew 25 from verse 14 to 30. As we know, Jesus often spoke in parables as a way to illustrate profound spiritual truths. Though the stories were short and memorable, the characters and symbolism in these parables were rich in meaning. To the mixed multitudes that were around sometimes when Jesus taught in parables, the meanings were hidden. But to us, his disciples, he always explained the meanings to us and made it plain for us to understand, often drawing them away from the crowd, because to us, speaking of his disciples, it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them, that is the crowd, it has not been granted. For whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. Therefore, I speak to them in parables, because while seeing, they do not see, and while hearing, they do not hear, nor do they understand. And that's Jesus speaking in Matthew chapter 13, verse 11. In this case, the prophecy of Isaiah in chapter 6, verse 9, which says, "Hearing you will hear, but not understand. Seeing you will see, but not perceive," is fulfilled. In the parable of the 10 virgins, Jesus refers to ancient Jewish marriage practices to convey his message in response to his disciples' question that were asked in Matthew 24, verse 3. Historically speaking, within the ancient Jewish marriage practices, there were 4 stages. First, there was a pledge or promise. Stage 2 was the formal engagement. The third would happen usually about a year later, when the families will celebrate the final coming together of the bride and the groom with the wedding feast. The celebration began with the bride adorning herself, preparing herself to meet her groom. And you can find that in Revelation 19, verse 7 to 9, and in Revelation 21, verse 2. Once the bride was prepared, the bride, along with her family and friends, processed through the town, arriving at the home of the groom where she was announced. And you can read about that in Revelation chapter 19, verse 9, and accepted with joyous celebration by all. You can read that in Revelation 21 from verse 2 to 8. It would be now at this stage that the wedding feast would begin. And unlike the 3 to 4 hour celebration we experience today, in the time of Christ, the wedding feast lasted at least a week. Finally, when the time was right, with great fanfare, the groom would come to his bride and carry her off to their home to consummate the relationship. From that point on, they would live together as one in a covenant relationship of love. With this in mind, Jesus' parable of the 10 virgins speak to brides that were at the third stage of the ancient Jewish marriage practices, and the oil in their lamps speak to the preparation they were meant to be undertaking while waiting for the arrival of the bridegroom. As we can see from verse 1 to 7 of Matthew 25, from verse 1 to 13, all 10 characters were virgins or bridesmaids, depending on what version of the Bible you read. All 10 of them were invited to the marriage feast, so there were no wedding crashers in this story. All 10 of them had their own individual lamps, as well as oil for their lamps. When the bridegroom was delayed, all 10 of them became drowsy and fell asleep. Then at midnight, they were all woken up by the shout, "Look, the bridegroom is coming. Come out and meet him." All 10 of them got up and prepared their lamps, and all of them went out to meet the bridegroom, but at different times. So on paper, all 10 virgins look the same. However, the Lord himself makes the distinction that only 50% of them were wise, whereas the other half were foolish. So what was it about the 5 wise virgins that set them apart? The answer is found in Matthew 25, from verse 2 to 4, and from verse 8 to 12. The 5 wise ones took extra oil along with them while waiting for the coming of the bridegroom. The 5 foolish ones only took enough for their lamps, not considering the fact that the bridegroom might be delayed, which means by the time he arrived, their lamps had gone out. Hence their request for the 5 wise virgins to give them some of their oil from the extra that they bought. From verse 10 to 12, we read that while the 5 foolish virgins went out to buy more oil, the bridegroom came, and only those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was locked. When the 5 foolish ones returned and were calling for the Lord to open the door for them, he replied, "Believe me, I don't know you." This is why the underlying theme in the parable of the 10 virgins is that of preparation and staying ready. Meanwhile, the context is about the second coming of Jesus Christ. In line with this, Jesus ends the parable in Matthew 25 verse 13 by saying, "So you too must keep watch, for you do not know the day or hour of my return." This parable serves as a warning for all of God's people to stay prepared and ready to meet him at his second and final return. Because just like in ancient Jewish marriage practices, where an announcement would be made announcing the arrival of the bridegroom, so will the coming of the ultimate bridegroom, Jesus Christ, be announced by his army of angels and trumpet sounds, and only those who are ready to meet him will be ushered into his marriage feast. This, of course, raises the question, how are we then to prepare, practically speaking, to meet Jesus at his second coming? I will teach on that in the next episode, so make sure you tune in. Thank you for joining me today. The Soul Food Podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all other streaming platforms. So share and subscribe as you listen. Follow me on IG at the_soul_food_podcast to stay connected. Until next time, may the Lord of Peace, Jesus Christ himself, give you his peace at all times and in every situation. The Lord be with you all and show you his favor. Amen.